Hello everyone, and welcome. Take a moment and picture the ultimate villain, the embodiment of all evil for most of the world. A single image comes to mind: horns, a pointed tail, cloven hooves, and a pitchfork held in a crimson hand. This is Satan, the prince of darkness, the father of lies, the ancient serpent who has been the arch-nemesis of God since the dawn of time. His story is etched into the... It's a story we all think we know. But what if I told you that in the beginning, this story was a lie? What if the most feared entity in civilization was born, not from a cosmic rebellion, but from a simple mistranslation of a single ancient Hebrew word? A word that meant something entirely different. What if the original Satan wasn't God's enemy at all? What if he was on God's payroll? To find the truth, we must open the scrolls of the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, and search for a name. But this is where the mystery begins. The name Satan, as we know it, a proper name for a single malevolent being, is almost nowhere to be found. Instead, we find a different term, a common noun, ha-Satan. The key is the prefix. In Hebrew it means the. This isn't a name, it's a type. This wasn't a demon king. This was an office. It was a role played by a member of the divine council, one of the Beni Elohim, the sons of God, who served the Almighty in his heavenly court. And his job was not to spread evil, but to test the virtue of humanity. He was heaven's prosecutor, God's quality control inspector, and the most famous case file of this celestial attorney is the Book of the Sons of God. These divine beings of immense power have come to present themselves before the Lord, who sits enthroned in unimaginable glory. It is a staff meeting of the cosmos. And as the divine beings check in, God notices one in particular. "From where have you come?" God asks. The reply is chillingly nonchalant, the voice of a traveling agent who has seen it all. From roaming throughout the earth, going back and... He's right there in the throne room, part of the inner circle. He has access, he has a voice, and he has a job to do. God, like a proud father, decides to boast about his favorite creation. "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." It is a moment of pure divine pride, but the Satan is the professional skeptic. Does Job fear God for nothing? He asks. The question hangs in the celestial air. Is this piety genuine, or is it just a transaction? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Think about what a legal dispute in the highest court of the universe. The Satan isn't defying God. He is challenging the premise of human righteousness. He's arguing that faith is a product of prosperity, that loyalty is bought with blessings, and God agrees to the test. He gives the Satan permission. "Very well then," God says, "everything he has is in your power. But on the man himself do not lay a finger." He is an instrument of a divine experiment, not an independent force of chaos. He is a function, not a fiend. And this isn't an isolated incident. In the book of Zechariah, we see him again standing in the heavenly court, accusing the high priest Joshua. Again, he's in his designated role, the prosecuting attorney in the book of Numbers. The word appears in a fascinating way. When the prophet Balaam goes against God's will, the text says that the angel of the Lord stood in the road as a śāṭān, to him fey as an obstacle, an adversary to block his path. Here, God's own angel is performing the function of a śāṭān. This reinforces the entire concept. It was a role, a task, a temporary obstruction. The ancient Hebrews did not have a concept of a single cosmic, as the prophet Isaiah would later say in God's voice, "I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things." In this worldview, there was no room for a rival power. There was only God, and his sometimes harsh, sometimes inscrutable agents, including the one whose job it was to test, to accuse, and to question, the Satan. So where did it all... For that, we must move forward in history to one of the most traumatic events in the life of ancient Israel, the Babylonian exile. In 586 BCE, the unthinkable happened. Solomon's temple, the dwelling place of God on earth, was destroyed. Jerusalem was sacked. the people of Judah were forcibly marched into captivity in the heart of the mighty Babylonian Empire. This was a crisis of faith unlike any. They were adrift in a sea of foreign gods, foreign ideas, and a terrifying new world. They began to ask a desperate question: why? Why had God allowed this to happen? Was he not all-powerful, or was there something else? In the crucible of exile, under the influence of their Persian conquerors, who eventually overthrew the Babylonians, they were exposed to a revolutionary new way of looking at the cosmos. It was built on a foundation of cosmic dualism. The universe was a grand battlefield, the stage for an epic war between two opposing and almost equally powerful deities. On one side was Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, the creator of all that is good, pure, and light. On the other was Angra Mainyu, also known as Ahriman, the destructive spirit, the creator of all that is evil, corrupt. This was a story of two titans locked in a struggle for the fate of the universe that would last for millennia. This concept was intoxicating. It provided a powerful answer to the problem of evil, calamity, and suffering were no longer just God's mysterious will or a punishment for sin. Now they could be seen as the work of an external, malevolent force, a cosmic enemy, an adversary who wasn't just. This idea of a fundamental opposition, of a universe split between two warring camps, began to seep into Jewish thought. It was a seed planted in fertile ground, and it began to grow, transforming the old idea of the Satan into something new, something far more sinister. As these new ideas swirled, a new kind of literature began to emerge, known as apocalyptic writing, born from periods of intense suffering and persecution. These texts painted vivid symbolic visions of the end times, of a final divine judgment, and of the cosmic forces at work behind the curtain of history. One of the most influential of these texts, though it never made it into the official Bible, was the Book of Enoch. And it is here, in the pages of this fiery visionary book, that we find the first true origin. It speaks of a group of angels known as the Watchers, led by figures named Semjaza and Azazel. These weren't just testers, they were rebels. Driven by lust for human women, they descended from heaven, abandoning their sacred posts. They took human wives, who then gave birth to a race of violent giants, the Nephilim, who ravaged the earth. But their sin was far greater than mere lust. The Azazel, the text says, taught men how to make swords and knives, shields and breastplates, the art of war. He taught women the art of deception, how to make up their faces with cosmetics and adorn themselves with fine jewelry. They taught sorcery, astrology, and root cutting. In short, they didn't test humanity, they deliberately and maliciously corrupted it. That God's judgment is swift and terrible. He sends the archangels to bind the watchers and cast them into the abyss, into a prison of darkness, to await the final judgment. Azazel, their leader, is bound hand and foot and cast into the desert, into total darkness. This story was a game changer. For the first time, we have a clear narrative of divine beings rebelling against God. The leader, Azazel, whose name was linked to the scapegoat ritual in the Book of Leviticus, became a prototype for a demonic king, a ruler of fallen spirits. The abstract job title of the accuser was now merging with the concrete image of a rebellious angel, a leader of a celestial insurrection. The stage was set. The character was being formed. Now all he needed was his grand entrance into the main event. We move now to the 1st century CE to Roman, occupied Judea. The air is thick with tension, messianic expectation, and whispers of rebellion. The dominant language of culture and commerce is Greek, and as the Hebrew scriptures are translated and reinterpreted, the final linguistic shift happens. Satan becomes the Greek satanas, now used definitively as and another Greek word is used interchangeably with it, diabolos, which means slanderer or accuser. From this word, we get our modern term devil. The titles and the job descriptions have now fully coalesced into a single terrifying personality. And his first major appearance is in one of the most dramatic showdowns in history, the temptation of Christ in the wilderness. The Gospels of Matthew. For 40 days and 40 nights, he fasts, pushing his human body to the absolute limit. He is isolated, starving, and vulnerable. And then the tempter appears, This is not the celestial prosecutor from the Book of Job. This is not an agent asking for God's permission. This being acts on his own authority, with his own agenda. He is a rival power confronting the Son of God himself. If you are the Son of God himself, it's a temptation of the flesh, a pragmatic solution to his hunger, but also a test of his divine power for personal gain. Jesus refuses, quoting scripture. Then, the devil takes him to the holy city, to the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. A temptation of pride and spectacle, a challenge for God to intervene and prove his Son's special status. The devil takes him to a very high mountain and shows him all the kingdoms of the world in their splendor. All this I will give you, he says, his voice dripping with the promise of ultimate power. This is the moment everything changes. He claims ownership of the world. It has been given to me, he lies, and I can give it to anyone I want to. Then comes the demand. So if you worship me, it will all be yours. The devil is presenting himself not just as an adversary, but as a rival god, a counter-sovereignty offering an alternative kingdom based on worldly power. He is the anti-Messiah, and this is the ultimate declaration of war. From this point on throughout the New Testament, this character is solidified. Jesus speaks of him constantly and never as a functionary of heaven. He is the prince of this world. In a blistering rebuke of his opponents, Jesus calls him a murderer from the beginning and the father of lies. The character profile is now complete. He is no longer a cynical but loyal servant. He is the source of all falsehood, the instigator of death, the alien ruler of a fallen world. The transformation from celestial prosecutor to cosmic gangster is absolute. But a character this central to the cosmic drama needs an origin story that matches his new elevated status as God's ultimate foe. The story from the Book of Enoch about the lustful watchers wasn't quite grand enough. The motive was too base. The new ultimate devil needed a motive that was more profound, more tragic, more epic. And so the early church fathers, brilliant theologians like Origen, Tertullian, they were building a coherent Christian theology, and they had a gaping hole in their narrative. Where did this incredibly powerful, purely evil being come from? If God is all good and all powerful, how could he create such a thing? The answer, they believed, must lie hidden within the pages of the Old Testament. They began to reread the ancient scrolls, not as historical documents, but as a vast collection of and in doing so, they performed one of the most creative acts of literary reinterpretation in human history. Their first stop was the Book of Isaiah, chapter 14. This chapter contains a taunt, a song of derision directed at a historical figure, the king of Babylon. This human king was a tyrant, infamous for his arrogance and cruelty. The prophet Isaiah he imagines the dead in Sheol, the underworld, stirring in shock at the arrival of this once mighty king, now reduced to a mere shade, and then come the famous lines, dripping with sarcasm. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn, you have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations, you said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens, I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the Mount of Assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. The original context is clear. This is a political cartoon in poetic form. It uses imagery from ancient Canaanite mythology, of a lesser god, the morning star, trying to usurp the throne of the chief god El, to ridicule the earthly ambitions of a pagan king. But the early church fathers saw something else entirely. They read these lines not as allegory, but as history. This couldn't be about a mere mortal man, who but a divine being could speak of ascending to heaven and raising his throne above the... It was a sin of cosmic ambition, the desire to be equal with God himself, and in that moment, a name was born. The Hebrew for morning star is Hellel ben Shahar. When Jerome translated the Bible into Latin, the lingua franca of the Roman Empire, he translated morning star as Lucifer, which literally means light bringer. A name, Lucifer, was created from a myth. The way these ancient texts were woven together to create a single narrative is absolutely mind-blowing. If you agree, and you want to see more content that deciphers these historical mysteries, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps us create more deep dives just like this one. Now, with the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven seemingly discovered, the Church Fathers needed more detail. Like the king of Babylon, this Phoenician monarch was renowned for his wealth and pride. And again, the prophet uses incredibly elevated, mythological language to describe his downfall. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you. You were anointed as a guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till wickedness was found in you. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor, so I threw you to the earth. Once more, the original context was about a human king, using the mythic language of the Garden of Eden to emphasize how far he had fallen from his state of God, given glory. But for the theologians, this was the missing piece of the puzzle. He wasn't just any angel. He was a guardian cherub, one of the highest orders, perfect in beauty and wisdom. He had been in Eden itself. His sin wasn't just ambition, but pride in his own magnificent beauty. The puzzle was now complete. The various threads had been woven into a single seamless tapestry. The heavenly accuser from Job, the rebellious watcher from Enoch, the cosmic rival from the Gospels, was now given a name, Lucifer, an angelic history as a guardian cherub, and an origin story of prideful rebellion, all cobbled together from political poems about pagan kings. The character of Satan, as the world would come to know him, was finally born. He was a composite creation, Where did the iconic image of the horned, goat-legged monster with a pitchfork come from? Because if you search the Bible from cover to cover, you will find no physical description of Satan whatsoever. The serpent in the garden is a serpent. The Lucifer of Isaiah is a fallen star. The accuser in Job is a celestial being. The image we hold in our heads is not biblical. It is a cultural construction. As Christianity spread across the pagan Roman Empire, it engaged in a process called syncretism. It absorbed and repurposed rituals, holidays, and ideas from the local religions. But it also actively demonized the old gods. It turned them from objects of worship into figures of evil, and it was from this rogues gallery of pagan deities that Satan got his face and body. From the Greek god Pan, the mischievous and lustful god of the wild, the forests and the flocks, came the most recognizable features. The goat's legs, the cloven hooves, and the horns. Pan represented untamed nature, fertility, and primal urges, everything the increasingly ascetic and controlled Christian church sought to suppress. By grafting his image onto the devil, they turned nature itself into... From the mighty sea gods, Poseidon of the Greeks and Neptune of the Romans, came his signature weapon. Their powerful trident, a symbol of their command over the oceans, was transformed into the devil's pitchfork, a tool for tormenting the damned in the fires of hell. From the gods of the underworld, the gloomy Hades of the Greeks and the wealthy Pluto of the Romans, came the concept of a subterranean realm of the dead, which was reimagined from a shadowy neutral place into a fiery kingdom of eternal punishment. A kingdom over which Satan was said to rule. For centuries, this composite image evolved in folklore and art. But it was a 14th-century Italian poet, Dante Alighieri, in his epic poem, Feci Inferno Fe, takes his readers on a journey through the 9 circles of hell. And at the very bottom, in the frozen, icy center of the pit, he finds Satan. But this is not a charismatic king on a flaming throne. Dante's Satan is a grotesque and pathetic monster. He is a giant, furry beast with 3 faces, a twisted parrot. He is trapped up to his waist in a frozen lake, weeping bloody tears from his 6 eyes. His 3 mouths are eternally chewing on the 3 greatest traitors in history, Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Christ, and Brutus and Cassius, who betrayed Julius Caesar. And with every beat of his enormous bat, like wings, he freezes the lake harder, making himself more of a prisoner. For Dante, Satan is not the ruler of hell. He is its ultimate prisoner, the embodiment of impotence and misery. This monstrous, tragic image dominated the popular conception of the devil for hundreds of years. But then, 3 centuries later, an English poet would give him one last dramatic reinvention. John Milton, in his 17th century masterpiece, Fé Paradise, lost Fé decided to and in doing so, he transformed the grotesque monster back into the glorious fallen angel. Lucifer. Milton's Satan is not a slavering beast. He is charismatic, intelligent, eloquent, and fiercely proud. He is a tragic anti-hero, a complex character driven by a recognizable sense of injustice and a defiant will. It is Milton who gives him his most famous line, the ultimate declaration of independence. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. And it is Milton's Satan who defiantly proclaims, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Milton gave the devil a soul. He gave him a compelling psychology, making him a figure not just of fear. This is the version of Satan that has echoed through our culture ever since. The rebellious, charismatic fallen angel who has inspired countless books, movies, and songs. So let's take a step back and look at the incredible journey we've been on. It starts with a simple Hebrew noun, śāṭān, a title, a function, the role of the celestial accuser in God's divine court, a loyal, then through the trauma of exile and the influence of Persian dualism, this functionary begins to morph into a cosmic adversary. An independent source of evil, apocalyptic texts like the Book of Enoch give this new entity a backstory of rebellion, of fallen angels and forbidden knowledge. In the New Testament, he is fully realized as Satan, the prince of this world, the father of lies. Then, in a stroke of theological genius, the early church fathers scour the Old Testament and, by reinterpreting poetic prophecies about pagan kings, they create the grand, tragic origin story of Lucifer, the light bringer, the most beautiful angel who fell from heaven because of pride. Finally, culture takes over. The cast-off gods of paganism lend him their horns, their hooves, and the masterpiece of an English bard gives him back his voice, his charisma, and his tragic, rebellious heart. The entity we call Satan is not a single static figure revealed in an ancient book. He is a living, breathing testament to the evolution of human thought. He is a character constructed over millennia, a composite being shaped by our history, our fears, our politics. He is the product of our enduring struggle with the problem of pain, and a powerful example of how a single word, misunderstood and reimagined, can give birth to the most enduring villain in history. The next time you see that image of the horned devil, remember its origins. It is not just a story of good versus evil. It's a story of how we tell stories, and how those stories, in turn, shape the very world we see. All right, that is all.